One of the unfortunate realities of dating, relationships, even marriage is that many of those situations fall apart. Many of those situations end up with breakups and divorces. And let's specifically focus right now on divorces because due to the what many would consider a high rate of divorce in so many places, it's caused people to be scared or reject marriage, dismiss the idea of getting married, and view it in an unhealthy manner. But I believe that a lot of that is due to a misunderstanding of what the disconnects are, a misunderstanding of what leads to these situations falling apart. That some of it gets talked about, some of it doesn't. But I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into, and more specifically, focusing on when men leave their wives. Because here's the thing: in what the statistic is, I believe 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Okay, so in many cases, it's the woman who finally pulls the trigger. Now, I'm not one who views that as evidence that men are much more willing to, or they love harder than the woman, or there's something more noble about that. I think there's a lot of context missing from those situations. We don't know what led to it. I think there's tons of reasons we can discuss as to why it ends up being the woman pulling the trigger in those situations. And that's a completely different video. But there's still, of course, many situations where it's the man who finally ups and leaves and wants to walk away. And a lot of times the narrative gets pushed that the man is abandoning his good wife and abandoning these situations out of selfishness or whatever the case may be, without really considering what's going on behind closed doors that may not be talked about. All right. Now, this isn't to validate anyone's divorce. This isn't to say you should get a divorce. I'm not getting into that. I'm just talking about reasons why there are a lot of men out there who leave their wives or leave their long-term relationship after many years of being with this woman. All right. So let's get to it. And the first thing on the list is that the woman cheated or had engaged in inappropriate behavior. Now, I'm bringing this up as number one because, again, I think we can agree that most people, when they think of cheating, they think of the man cheating on the woman. Now, I'm not here to argue who cheats more or whatever, but I do think people underestimate how much cheating occurs on the other side. Now, one of the reasons why you may not hear about it as much is one, we could argue that women are just better at doing it when they do choose to go that route. All right. They're more on top of the details. I always say women, just real quick side note, women like think ahead. Women consider all possible scenarios, questions, anything that would blow up the situation and plan for it. Men tend to think for the moment. Think just one thing. All right, I'm about to see her. Let me just give an excuse. But they're not considering all the possible loose ends. Anyways, I just wanted to express that. So going back to the fact that a lot of times there are situations where the woman has cheated. And again, one of the reasons why you won't hear about it is because she may be good at hiding it, or is because for a lot of men, it's more embarrassing to be telling people, yeah, I had to leave because my woman cheated on me. See, when we hear about the man cheating, right, on the woman, most people will paint that story as he's just a dog, he's just selfish, all these negative things, he's a cheater, whatever the case may be. And then on the flip side, when it's the man who's being cheated on, many people would then paint it as, what did you do wrong? What were you not giving her? It's more about him. So for a lot of men, they don't get that sympathy. And if anything, some people will even look at them like, oh, you were less than, that's why she cheated on you, right? They don't give that same energy to the woman that they give to the man in a lot of situations. So there's a lot of men who aren't gonna announce that this is what happened to them, aren't gonna, post it on Facebook or whatever the case may be, aren't gonna put her out there like that. But they're gonna leave. All right. And sometimes it isn't simply cheating in the sense of sexual relations with someone. I know of situations where, because I mentioned inappropriate behavior, situations where a woman may have kissed another man. A woman, there was one situation where it didn't immediately lead to divorce, but it led to the beginning of the end, where the man saw a letter that the woman wrote to what was supposed to be a male friend. And after he read the letter, he found it. It was hidden somewhere. He finds it. And he's like, "You've never talked to me like this. You've never expressed these types of things to me," which of course created insecurities. It created a lot of issues with this quote unquote friend. And now him feeling like you don't really love me because look how you can speak to him, but you don't speak to me like that. And then that was, again, it didn't right then become a divorce, but that pretty much was what kicked the whole thing off to ending in divorce. So anyways, the point is a lot of these things can happen, but you don't hear about it. All right. And there's so much I can say, but the bottom line is understand that it is happening on both sides. Men do get cheated on too. And that can lead to a lot of people wanting divorce. Now, I know there's some women that will say, well, why is it that men expect us to stick around when they cheat, but then, leave immediately if a woman crosses that line? Well, listen, everyone has a choice in what they are willing to deal with and not deal with. And so just because some men out there may expect you to stick around, and some of it is not that they expect you to stick around, they just want you to. They just don't want you to leave them despite of what their behavior. But that doesn't mean you have to. And at the end of the day, for a lot of men, yes, it's just as it's I said it's harder for them to speak on it or tell people about it because how people will view them. It's also harder for them to accept it when it happens in their relationship. But either way, you have a choice on what you will or will not deal with. But that is just one of the reasons why men leave after many years. So I want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. And listen, divorces, breakups, they hurt. They're tough. It's hard to deal with. And I want you to understand if you're going through it, you are not alone. There is help available to you. And it's so beneficial when you can have someone, person who's not involved in your situation, that is a professional that you can talk to and kind of work through this with and focus on bouncing back and healing and getting the assistance you need. And that's why I really want to encourage you to consider getting therapy because it can give you some amazing results and be so beneficial to you. And that's why I truly recommend checking out BetterHelp because they can connect you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful and unbiased advice. If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Stephan Speaks. Starting therapy can be hard. The right therapist for you may not be in your area, and some people find the face-to-face interaction of therapy uncomfortable. To get started, you fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you'll get matched with your therapist in most cases within 48 hours or less. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. So start your journey today with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Stephan Speaks. Clicking that link helps support this channel, and it also gives you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. All right, so now another big and very common reason why men leave their partners after many years is because of a sexless marriage or sexless relationship, okay? Now, I will say that many times, and here's something that's very important. A lot of times, these reasons that I'm going to talk about are not discussed enough because they lead to infidelity, and then people choose to only focus on the infidelity, meaning using the sexless marriage. You may have a situation where they're not, I know tons of situations I've come across where they haven't been intimate for 3 months, 6 months. I've hit some situations even a year, okay? And eventually it leads to, in many cases, the man now cheating. Once the man cheats, the discussion is no longer about the sexless marriage. It's simply about his infidelity. So no one hears now what contributed to things boiling over in that way. They only focus on the end result, so to speak. But sexless marriages are, again, very common. And I know there's a lot of women who feel like, why does sex have to be so important? These men, are just never satisfied, things of that nature. Now, I'm going to give you my perception, and listen, you can choose to disagree with this, but first, from a spiritual or biblical perspective, it's very clear that scripturally it says, listen, do not deny your partner your body. And I'm not here to dive too deep into that right now, other than to say that says to me how important intimacy is in the relationship. Okay? Even when I forgot which disciple it was that pretty much said, for the sake of not being basically in these streets, get you a wife, get you a partner so that you can have your needs met by them. This has conveyed to me how important it is, but I feel like too many people dismiss the importance of it once in a long-term relationship or in a marriage. And even though I'm mentioning long-term relationships, because I want to make sure I include more people in this discussion that may be experiencing these things, I understand that, of course, from a biblical standpoint, we're supposed to be waiting till marriage. So I'm not arguing against that. I'm just trying to discuss this in a way that can resonate with all who are going through this, okay? But back to the point of, the importance of intimacy. I think too many times it gets dismissed, and we have to understand that when we are connecting with each other long term, we got to be able to meet each other's needs. Now, I understand that for many women, part of what leads to them neglecting their partner sexually is that they feel neglected as well, emotionally or even sexually in other ways, right? Maybe they're engaging in intimacy, but their needs are never met. So I understand it, but both sides have to work towards correcting the underlying issues so that we can ensure that we're able to have harmony when it comes to being in the bedroom, all right? And we have to be able to discuss these things. We have to be able to say what it is that we need. And I think if you are engaging in intimacy early on in your dating process, relationship, or whatever, you want to be as honest as possible, as early as possible, because many people don't do that, eventually get married, never revealing the things that they didn't care for or wasn't satisfactory to them. And then by the time they get married, they can't keep pushing themselves to engage when they don't genuinely enjoy the process, right? Or enjoy the experience. And now that leads to neglect. And that neglect, even if it doesn't lead to infidelity, leads to a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, frustration, negativity in the household. You name it, one way or another, it leads to the end of this relationship. And yes, it leads to a lot of men leaving their partners. All right. So I think we also have to understand that sometimes those issues that are creating a disconnect are health related. And of course, we have to be sympathetic and understanding when those are the case, but we also have to strive for looking for how do we correct the underlying health issues that are blocking us from being able to come together in this way. But either way, it's again, extremely common issue, and we've got to start taking it more seriously if we want to have more successful marriages in our society. All right, so let's keep this going. And another reason why men leave their wives after many years of marriage is an abusive relationship. So, of course, it's extremely common that when we think abusive relationship, let's be real, most people are thinking the man abusing the woman. But I think many of you will be shocked and surprised how much is happening on the other side. All right. And this is another one of those examples or situations where men aren't going to be as vocal about this is why I left. Okay. Because for many men, it feels embarrassing. Embarrassing to say that I allowed this woman or allow myself to be in a relationship with this woman who was physically abusive. Some of it is verbally abusive. A lot of times it's verbally, both verbally and physically. But again, it's not something where the average man feels comfortable having to let the world know this is what happened to me, right? So many suffer in silence until they finally can't take it anymore or find the strength to walk away. And again, that woman who is the abusive one, she's not going to present to the world, her friends or whoever, that I was over here abusing this man. That's not the story she's going to give. So people end up getting uh, this incorrect perception of what actually happened in that woman's relationship. But the whole time, it was her. It was her. And she has anger issues. She has unresolved trauma. She may have grown up in an abusive household and thought this is how, it's acceptable behavior. Whatever the case may be, wherever the dysfunction came from, this is what she engages in. And again, it's just one of those things where you're not going to hear a lot about it. So of course, this is one I want to bring to your attention, but you're just so less likely to find out about when it happens in people's relationships. All right. And of course, I'm going to say this, I hope none of you are women who are being abusive to a man. But if you are, I encourage you to get the help you need. I encourage you to get to the root of why you lash out, why you take things to a physical place, or again, that verbal abuse, because a lot of people, a lot of women sweep under the rug the verbal abuse. Because again, they feel like, oh, it's not as bad as the physical abuse, or they may feel like this is common behavior, talking to their man in a certain kind of way, being blatantly disrespectful, constantly cursing them out. These things, and I know some of you are going to say, well, he's behaving in that way. And that's different, right? If he's behaving that way, well, one, I would say, well, both of y'all need to leave that relationship. If it's that toxic and neither of you are willing to go get the help necessary to fix this, you both need to walk away, right? We don't want to let their behavior be an excuse or be a reason why we say we're going to engage in that same type of negative, toxic behavior. But we're going to assume here it's not him engaging in that. The woman is. You might be that person just in case. And you got to be willing to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, maybe I do need to check on the way I speak to him and the way I come across at him and how it's making him feel and how it's beating him down, right? And how it's causing him to lose confidence and deteriorating his self-esteem, right? Of course, as a man, if I was talking to him, I would encourage him on how he needs to handle it. But speaking to you in this moment, I want to encourage you to make sure you're doing your part to not be that person. All right, so this is a longer list, and I want to make sure I get everything out in this one video, not wait for a second video. So I'm going to try to be a lot quicker with these next few points, all right? So another reason why a lot of men leave their wives after many years is he wants freedom. Simple as that. And again, I'm not saying this as a valid explanation or reason to leave your partner. I'm just explaining this is a reason why some do. Because some feel like their marriage, their long-term relationship has become a prison where they are not able to move freely. They are not able to do what they want to do. And it's exhausting. And it also leads to the person feeling like they've had to suppress themselves and sacrifice what they wanted and what makes them happy. And so now they're just ready to break free, ready to break out. Now, I know a lot of times when a woman hears me say the man wants freedom, she's thinking freedom to act a fool and run these streets. And sometimes, yes, sometimes that is what that man is looking for. Other times, it's not that. It's just the freedom to be able to enjoy his life in the way that he wants it. So meaning there's some guys who are married or in long-term relationships and their partner takes an issue whenever they want to hang out with their homeboys, right? Takes an issue when they spend too much time watching football or whatever the case may be. Restricts them in a lot of ways that aren't the man trying to engage in inappropriate behavior, just doing things that he enjoys. And some men are with very controlling women, right? And she just makes, and even if he's able to do some of it, She makes it an issue every time. She gives them an attitude, gives them an earful, all these things. And over time, that wears people down. And this is why it's so important that before we get into a serious relationship, before you marry someone, you really discuss things like this. You discuss the dynamic of how much freedom we have with each other. What is appropriate, inappropriate? What is going to be okay? If he's hanging out with the guys, all right, maybe you're cool with the hanging out with the guys, but to a certain extent. So for some women, it might be, all right, cool, you can hang out with them, but don't be coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning, or don't be doing X, Y, Z. And you have to make sure you both are on the same page about it, because people have different perceptions of what should be acceptable freedoms in a relationship. And so rather than trying to force our views onto each other, we need to just make sure we are in alignment with each other in this regard. But freedom is a big reason why some men end up leaving their partners. All right, so another reason why a lot of men leave their partners after so many years is because the kids have finally left the house. So an unfortunate, sad reality is that there are a lot of relationships and marriages right now being held together simply because of the kids. The two individuals don't really like each other anymore. They don't truly get along with each other. They're not pouring into each other's needs and desires. But because there are kids involved, they have used that as a reason and motivation to stay together. Now, let me be clear. This is my personal belief. I do not believe in staying together for the kids, even in marriage. Reason being is because if you can stay together and still create a happy, peaceful home, all right, cool. That's fine. But if you're gonna stay together in misery for the sake of keeping the family and the kids, having the kids there, whatever, that to me is a problem, because that misery, that negativity, that unhealthy relationship is going to impact those children. As someone who has coached thousands of people, so many of people's issues stem from childhood. And even though it may not be viewed as it was because my two parents didn't really love each other or weren't really into each other, or whatever the case may be, what people don't understand is a lot of the hurtful things they experience with their parent, one or both, is a symptom of that parent being in an unhappy relationship. So, for example, let's say there's a woman, she's with this man, he's controlling, he's a narcissist, she is unhappy, she's miserable, but she's trying to stick it out for the kids. But because she is dealing with so much misery, stress, maybe resentment, she doesn't realize that she takes that negative energy out on the children. She doesn't realize how that might be pouring over to them. She don't realize how she may be having an attitude with them, being short with them, not having same level of compassion and patience for them, because she's already burnt out by her unhealthy relationship. So one way or another, it ends up pouring over into the children. So for me, I can't co-sign that, because that only continues or creates a very horrible negative cycle. Okay? The goal should be creating peaceful, loving households. And for some people, that will only be achieved apart. Because for a lot of people, they were never supposed to be together. They were never a fit. They were never best for each other. I won't get too deep into that right now. I'll say that for a different video. And I know, again, this is my beliefs and personal perceptions. I'm going to always say, for those of you who are believers, to pray about it, right? I'm not sitting here saying, go get a divorce tomorrow. But the reality is that a lot of people got with individuals that they should have never gotten with. And then trying to band-aid it by staying together for the kids is just not going to work. But back to the main point. So what happens is, because it has been a miserable relationship, once the kids are now gone, the man's like, okay, I'm free. And of course, it happens with women too. But that's a reason why some men finally eventually leave. Because like, now, all right, the kids are gone. They're out the house. They're grown enough. Now I don't have to feel obligated to stay here any longer. And now, because they're older, I don't have the fear of my partner, my wife, will soon to be ex-wife, keeping my kids away from me. When they're little, that's a huge fear for a lot of guys. But when they're older, it's like, all right, we don't have to worry about that. So now he ends up walking away. All right, so here's another one. Reason why men leave after many years is because his partner, his wife, has let herself go. Now, I know that one is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. A lot of people, take issue with that reason for a man to leave and feel like that's ridiculous and, that's unreasonable, things of that nature. But it's still the reality of many situations. And I think what people miss, though, in the letting herself go is how that plays into other areas of the relationship that now bring it down. So it isn't simply she now looks different. For some guys, it is that. All right. I know one situation where they got married. They were married for a few years. The wife ended up putting on 100 pounds. This is a true story. She ended up putting on 100 pounds. Over time, he was trying to get her to lose weight. She wasn't doing it. He felt like he got tired of it. It led to them separating. So they were on the path to divorce. During the separation, she ends up losing the 100 pounds. And she admitted part of her motivation was, I want to show him what he's missing. Well, it worked because they end up kind of reconciling or, rekindling things. And now they're being intimate again and they end up getting back together. Unfortunately, in this story, she ended up regaining the weight. And then that ultimately led to divorce. Now, what people end up missing in that is, again, it was one thing on the gaining weight, letting herself go, whatever. But some of the deeper things is that, for example, I know of situations where the woman may have quote unquote let herself go or not look the same anymore. And let's say the man actually does not have an issue. However, the woman is not happy with how she looks anymore. And because she's not happy with how she looks anymore, she now walks around more depressed, more sad, low energy. She now feels uncomfortable being intimate. So because she's uncomfortable being intimate, now there's less intimacy. And so now it spirals into all these other issues that stem from this initial, physical change that makes it hard for the husband partner to deal with. Okay? And then there's also the layer of that person feeling like you don't care enough about them to want to do anything about it. All right? So it's almost like, let's flip it for a second. Let's say you have a partner, a husband, and he used to take you out. Let's say you love going out to dinner, right? And he loved date nights. And he took you on a date night every week for this example. And then it comes to a point where now he doesn't do it anymore. He stops behaving in that way. And you're asking him, hey, let's fix this. I want to get back to date night. And he has all these reasons why we can't do date night, which are all things that can be fixed if he's willing to put in the effort, but he's unwilling to do that. So now you taking issue with it isn't simply because you're not being taken on date night anymore. It's also because you feel like he doesn't care enough to put into work to fix something that would make you happier, that you would enjoy. All right. And that's the additional layer of this that a lot of people do not discuss or understand, that leads to a lot of resentment, frustration, gives more fuel to the fire of people falling apart. And then eventually, the man or whoever leaving the relationship. So it's something to be mindful of. And again, I think it's something to discuss early as possible and understanding what are the standards that we're setting for each other as far as how we present ourselves to each other. And it's not just, again, letting ourselves go physically, but how we treat each other, how we talk to each other. All that has to be understood and honored if we want to sustain healthy, happy relationships in the long run. All right, so I got two more for you. And again, I'm going to try to just wrap these up pretty quickly. So the next one on the list is a lot of men leave due to feeling unappreciated and a lack of support. All right. Now, I remember one time a man said to me, when you talk about cheating to women, make sure you let them know cheating doesn't always start with sexual desire or, anything physical. that for a lot of situations, it starts with a lack of support. It starts with this emotional disconnect. I think when we talk about a lack of emotional fulfillment and not being poured into in that way, we tend to think about the women receiving that lack or not receiving what they need. But a lot of times men are not receiving what they need, right? And that creates a bigger disconnect between them and their partner. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of people's lives, men or women, is that when there's that void there, someone comes along who's willing to fill that void. A friend, a coworker, an old lover, whoever. At some point, someone tends to creep in, recognize the void. Maybe they don't recognize the void, but they naturally are pouring into what that person is not getting at home. And unfortunately, especially when it starts off emotional, that is a slippery slope. I'm sorry. A slippery slope because people then view it as harmless. It's like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I just talk to this person because they're very supportive and they pour into me and they encourage me. But in creating this emotional bond, it then has the chance of turning physical. And in many cases, it does turn physical. And this is where a lot of people have to recognize cutting things off at the root and understanding what can lead to the bigger issue. But then some would even argue, even getting that emotional fulfillment elsewhere is emotional cheating. And that's a whole different issue. But either way, that lack of support and let me also again highlight lack of appreciation, because there's a lot of men who feel like their wife is never satisfied. There's nothing they do that's good enough. Or they could be doing great and let them do one little thing wrong by a genuine mistake. And it's like all the good has been forgotten. And the only thing that's being focused on is the bad. And what's being held over their head constantly is the bad with no appreciation of the good. That is exhausting. Whether you are a man or a woman, that is exhausting. And again, it starts to take its toll. And all of these things, it can start with that surface issue, that issue initially of lack of appreciation, and then it turns into the other issues, infidelity, and all this other stuff, you know, even abuse. Not saying that, well, listen, yeah, not saying that makes someone abusive, but at least verbally, I would argue, yeah, some people do to feel like you never have my back, lash out, and now things get verbally abusive and they start to go down that path even more. So either way, it is a common occurrence. It is a reason why some men leave, and it is something that we have to guard our relationships against. All right, and now last but not least, and let me just say this. I'll explain it after I say it. Forget that. So the last but not least reason why men leave their partners, their wives after many years is due to falling out of love. Okay? Now, I'm someone who doesn't necessarily believe in falling out of love. I believe that when it is true love, when it is genuine, you never fall out of it. It's always there. Genuine love cannot be, it can't be destroyed, but we can reject embracing it, all right? Which to me is different than falling out of love, meaning I can still love you, but for reasons choose, I no longer want to be in this relationship, okay? However, when we say falling out of love, I don't have those feelings towards you anymore. I don't care for you like that anymore. I feel like what's really happening, I think some people are just labeling it as falling out of love, but there's really other things going on here. I also think that for many people, it's not about falling out of love, it's realizing they never truly were in love. The unfortunate reality is that, again, a lot of people get together, get married for the wrong reasons, to the wrong people. Some people married because they had kids first. So it wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this person. It was, we have kids. I want to own up to my responsibilities. And what I feel is best is to keep this family together. So now when things fall apart, you didn't fall out of love. It was never about love. You know, for other people, it was, man, I'm getting lonely and I'm getting older and this is probably my best option. I don't want to be alone. There's all kinds of reasons. Or I want to have kids with somebody, so let me find someone that I can just make it work with. The list goes on and on. And it just shows you how much that many situations were not born out of love. So then when it falls apart, you're not falling out of it. Okay? And that's why I think it's so important for us to understand the goal. Like I generally want to see more people get married, but not for the sake of just being married. I want to have people be happily married. I want people to get with the right person. And to do that, it can take time. You know, I think some people have to recognize and realize that, listen, the process of finding the person that you truly align with is longer than a lot of people may like, because part of that process is going to require you to discover understanding yourself. If you're a believer, getting more in tune with God, because if you want what God has for you, then there's certain steps that have to be taken. There's a certain standard that has to be met before God says, here is your blessing. It's time. Because if he gives it to you before then, he knows it'll fall apart because you're not ready for it yet. And that person's not ready for it yet. So there's a greater level of preparation that occurs. And the timeline for people are going to be different. For some people, that preparation might be a couple years. For other people, it might be 7. For someone else, it might be 10, 15. We don't know what's a part of the process, but you want to make sure that you are embracing the process and know that God's process is the best process. All right, so lean on him, lean on his understanding. Pray before you decide who you're going to be with. I say it all the time. When I coached divorced people, and I asked them, did you ask God if you should marry this person? 90% of the time, they say no, they never asked. The other 10% say they asked God, God told them no, and they married that person anyway. It shows how much people are missing that step when before they move into a serious committed relationship or into marriage. And I think if we included that more, we could save ourselves from a lot of these unfortunate situations and build happier, healthier relationships. Hey, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check this one out right here, and I'll see you there. Those red flags start to look a little yellow because you're trying to look past it. You're trying to rationalize because you want to hang on to this great intimacy that he may be providing. And believe it or not,